Hi, everyone, and welcome to this latest This Is Purpose podcast. And I'm delighted to be joined by Satvir Kaur, who has a number of firsts to her name. The first uh, female Sikh leader of a council in England, I think. Also, the first Sikh to seek parliamentary election in Southampton, I believe. And Satvir, you and I have known each other for quite a long time now. It's great to be able to have a chat about your experiences and views on social mobility. And it'd be also good in the conversation to see where you think Labour might go in this policy space, because it's something that's very dear to the Labour Party's heart. But sometimes the Labour Party can have good intent, but not necessarily follow through sometimes. And it'd be good to get your sense of where the party's thinking is. But before we get into any of that, it would be great to know and great for you able to tell our listeners what inspired you to get involved in politics and why local politics? Because you've been a councillor for what, 10 years, is it, or thereabouts?
It's actually 14, almost 14 years,
Oh.
quite a while. I've loved it. I love local government. I just think there's all different types and levels of politics, and both of us have been in local government, and I'm sure you'd agree that actually there's nothing like local government and impacting people's daily lives. I think there's just something really special about it, and whether it's helping an elderly lady get a dropped curve so she doesn't have to carry her shopping for free streets every time, or helping a mum who's deciding between heating and eating and making sure that she's getting the right support that she needs. I just think the way you can impact someone's daily life is just absolutely incredible in local government. And yeah, I've loved every minute of it. I mean, it's come with its challenges, but no, I absolutely love it. So I think your question was around how I entered it, right?
Yeah, well, what inspired you to get involved? And actually, why the Labour Party as well?
Oh, okay. Well, I've always been, I'm a inner city kid that grew up on free school meals in Southampton. I've always had an interest in politics. I suppose I've never always traditionally been political. And that might be partly because I don't know, I looked at politics and looked at politicians and just back then didn't see people like me. So just didn't think it was for people like me. And I suppose the way I got involved was I was volunteering at a local community event, and this is back in 2010 before the general election, and bumped into John Denham. And for those that don't know him, he's like a minor celebrity in Southampton, been the MP for over 2 decades, was minister, and spoke to him. And I think it was at a time when I was actually genuinely feeling a little bit disillusioned, but told him I really didn't like the Tories. And he convinced me to join his campaign. And so I dutifully did. He took down my number, and I just remember being really excited that John Denham took down my number, thinking I'd never hear from him. And I didn't for a couple of weeks. And then someone from his team contacted me saying, something's happening on Monday, can you come? And I just happened to be free. So I rocked up, and it just happened to be the day that Gordon Brown, who was Prime Minister at the time, was visiting Southampton, and they needed bright, young, enthusiastic people to greet him at the station. And I was one of those people. So my first day helping out the Labour Party was meeting the Prime Minister, which is pretty cool. But actually, after that, helping John in his campaign, and he won by 192 votes, which is obviously nothing. And I suppose that was the first time that I felt that you as an individual can make a difference, because you definitely talk to hundreds, thousands of people during an election campaign. And I suppose everybody on that campaign, especially me, it really hit a nerve about how you can belong to something bigger and you as an individual can make a meaningful difference. And Southampton deserved a good MP like John Denham, and I was just really happy and proud that we managed to get him over the line. So I suppose that's when I got active within politics and the Labour Party. And I remember a few months later, someone texted me saying, have you considered being a councillor? And I remember distinctly responding, going, oh, I'm really sorry, I think you sent this to the wrong person. And Fraser was his name. I turned around going, no, Satvir, we meant you. And they convinced me to stand in what then was considered a Conservative stronghold. And they were like, the chances of you winning are slim. We really would love you as a candidate. All you've got to do is like knock some doors, talk to people. You don't have to go overboard. And so I ran in what then was dubbed as the unwinnable, and dutifully talked to people on the doorstep, which I actually really loved, and won by a whisker, but I won. So actually, I think I'm on like local ITV crying because I'm so shocked I won, and like almost saying to people around me, going, I don't think this was meant to happen. I don't really know what I'm doing. And actually, it's one of those jobs where no one can really describe what it's like until you're doing it, and you can really make it what you want it to be. And fortunately, for me, I absolutely loved it, because it's one of those things I think you either love or you really, really hate. And I really, really loved it. And I suppose I found my vocation representing individuals and communities and fighting for your area and just trying to make the place you grew up a better place. Yeah, I've loved every minute of it.
And one of the things that I feel we've kind of lost a little sight of in our politics over recent years is that sense of politics as public service and wanting to improve people's living and working conditions. That's kind of why the Labour Party was invented in the first place. It was about workers' rights. And it feels as though, I personally, I've really struggled with the sort of move towards identity and tribal politics, because it feels very divisive rather than uniting. Is that something that you feel as well about politics, or how's your experience been in terms of identity? Because particularly in Labour, identity politics has become more and more significant.
I think it did a few years ago. I have to admit, I think it's got slightly less in recent years. But having been an active member of the Labour Party for a decade plus, I definitely feel like I've had a bit of a roller coaster in that time. And yeah, I'd agree with you. I think that for a while there, we did get really hung up on how you identified in the Labour Party and what wing you were part of, and did you support this person? And if I'm honest, I thought it was a waste of time and energy, because at the same time, the communities we were trying to serve were suffering and we were too busy talking to ourselves. So I'm actually really pleased that we've stopped talking to ourselves and we're talking to people that matter, and saying, actually, we know that you're suffering and this government hasn't done you any favours, and actually we can offer an alternative and real hope. So that part I'm really pleased of. During the internal divisiveness, I actually it was challenging. I remember being chair of our local party at the time, which was an interesting.
Now that is a thankless task.
I
did many years ago.
And I remember telling people, I don't belong to a wing of the party. I'm just Labour. I don't care what faction you're part of, or like if you care about Labour values and you want to get rid of the Tories because you don't think they're doing a very good job in your community or for this country, get on board. But I'm not dealing with any internal rifes. But yeah, I suppose that's kind of my politics. There's so much to do. We don't have time or energy to be infighting, and I'm just so pleased that's behind us.
And for you as an individual, and with a lot of experience in politics now, what are the issues that you really care about personally? I mean, of course, as a politician, you have to work across the whole of the spectrum of issues that people come to you with. But what do you really, really want to change if you get the chance?
Well, coming from local government, naturally, I want a better deal for local councils, because I just think it's the most challenging, difficult time for local government it's ever been. In Southampton, for example, 86% of what we spend is on safeguarding, which means 14% is on everything else. Now, that is just not sustainable. And that's not unique to Southampton. We've got less and less funding and more to do, and that's just not sustainable. But I suppose for me, and this comes from growing up in an area of deprivation, social mobility naturally will be important to me. Housing, I am really passionate about, borderline nerdy about. I just think if you sort people's housing out and get housing right, you can genuinely change people's life outcomes. So you need a good quality, affordable home to help with your health and well-being, to get a job, for your education, for your employment. I just think having a home can be so transformative. And for too long in this country, we've been treating housing like a commodity when actually it should be a basic human right. And councils in particular should be given so many more leeway to build genuine affordable council housing again, and they just have not been. I'm really pleased with Labour's focus on housing, because I think it's really easy for national political parties, and you've probably seen this before in the past, where everyone knows there's a housing crisis, but no one really tackles it head on. And I'm actually really pleased to hear from the National Labour Party saying, we know this is an issue, we know this is important, actually we're going to try and tackle it head on. And I don't think the Labour Party will change it overnight because it's such a big beast, but the fact that they're taking it seriously, talking about it, and have real policies that will make a meaningful difference to local communities and individuals I talk to, I think is really powerful.
You know, we've just done a round table this afternoon with Andy Weston, who you'll remember was leader of Trafford when you and I were both council leaders, and is now obviously the MP for Stretford and Urmston. And he is one of the stars in Labour in terms of making the case for more and better housing. And it's really interesting because once you start picking away at that what sounds like a really simple objective, there's so much to do to get action on the ground, whether it's land availability or skills or materials or planning permissions. And he was saying something really interesting, that we don't often think of housing as an equalities issue, but it really is. And I'm reminded of when councils took responsibility for public health back in 2013. I remember our Director of Public Health in Newcastle, when I asked him what he thought our public health priorities should be, he said, the two things that make the biggest difference are having a secure job and a warm, dry home. And I thought that was a really interesting take on how important a decent home is and decent job is as a bedrock of a good society.
And like when the NHS was created, it was created as a housing policy originally, because of the links between good quality housing and your health and well-being. And even things, it's not just about building affordable homes, but them being affordable to run and actually building communities with the right infrastructure. It's about getting rid of no-fault evictions, which is the biggest contributor to homelessness in a place like Southampton. There's just so much to do in housing, but it could really make a meaningful difference. That's not to say I don't care about everything else. I'm very, very passionate about housing in particular.
Well, one of the things that I learned in my time in frontline politics is that the list of things that you could do is endless, and if you just take a sort of scattergun, shotgun approach to it, you can hit a lot of things but not necessarily have much impact. And one of the things that I came to learn is that actually just focusing over time on one or two things that really make a difference is probably the best way to be effective, particularly in a modern, complex political world like the one we live in now.
No, I couldn't agree more.
And how did you find being leader of the council? Because I don't think we really celebrated the fact that you were the first Sikh female council leader in the country. And that's real achievement.
I actually didn't know. It was only after I got elected someone mentioned it, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And I think obviously it's a huge privilege and honour, and I was really excited but I think it meant more it meant more for others, but not in a bad way. It's just for me, it was a little bit sad that we're in kind of the 21st century, kind of almost halfway through it, and we've never had a female Sikh leader of a council. So for me, it was a little bit sad, and I suppose I promised myself that I might be the first, but I definitely won't be the last, and I'll do what I can to encourage others into politics and try and take leadership positions. But I do think it matters because representation matters, and I find it really frustrating when people talk about, it's, surely it's just about talent and skills and quality. And actually, it doesn't mean that people from areas of deprivation or people of colour or people of different religions are less skilled or less talented. They're just given less opportunities. And the amount of people we put off joining politics because they don't see people like them is astounding. And at a time when trust between politicians and politics and local communities is at a record low, I'm just really keen that we can bridge that gap with good, hardworking local elected representatives.
Actually, I couldn't agree more, and that is so important for the health of our democracy. I sometimes worry that quite a lot of the population think that politicians are some sort of alien being and just completely detached from reality and live in a different world. Now, you and I know that that's not true, and even if people have very different political views to the ones that we hold, most people are involved in politics for altruistic reasons and wanting to improve things for other people. But there is something about our system that seems to make it less than the sum of its parts somehow. And that point around the importance of representation, I can remember when there were only, in my teenage years, there were only about 30 women in the entire House of Commons, and they were seen as a novelty still. And I mean, I know we've made huge strides in recent years, but our democracy really, really needs proper, effective representation from all parts of our community if it's to be seen as effective. Otherwise, people think the political system isn't there for them, and that's dangerous.
Yeah, I also think this isn't diversity for diversity's sake in like all its different forms. Like genuinely having been at those top tables and run a council and had all the leadership positions I've had, I have noticed that the more diverse thought you have, people with different life skills and experiences, the better decision making you have. Because if you've got the same people that think the same, that have had the same experiences, you're only going to get to one outcome. Whereas if you have, and I mean, there's definitely a lot more challenge and those decisions definitely take a lot longer. But at the end of it, you've made a really well-rounded, considered decision, and surely that is better for local communities. When I first became leader, I ensured that at least 50% of my cabinet was female. We had all outs, and I was really proud that our group, despite getting the biggest ever majority we've ever had in the city, we elected 50% women as well. We've got over 20% ethnic minorities. There's people from the public sector, the private sector, people with disabilities, there's people that have had all different types of jobs and backgrounds and upbringings and experiences, people that have migrated to this country and to Southampton and made it their home and now want to contribute, and all of them have something different to contribute, and all of that leads to just better decision making, in my opinion.
And if we're talking about, I mean, social mobility is one of those things that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of people. But if we're talking about breaking down the barriers to people getting involved in politics, what do you think is still some of the big barriers there that prevent people from getting better involved or more involved?
So, I mean, this probably, every time you've probably asked this comes up. But it sounds like a really exciting job, but as you know, it's really tough. It's really not sexy, and it's definitely not about like cutting ribbons. The amount of abuse you've got to take is incredible. I mean, I talk to especially young people that I'm trying to encourage to get into politics. My number one question is, why politics if they're interested, or, why do you want to be an elected representative, whether that's kind of, within the council or an MP. And unless they say something along the lines of, I want to make a difference, like I always in a nice way say, this may not be the job for you, because I genuinely believe, as whether at whatever level, national or local, the hardship you deal with and what you've got to do is just not worth it unless you're in it for the right reasons.
And certainly local government isn't particularly glamorous, is it? I mean, it never has been.
No, I know people think you just swan around, and I probably spent most of the last 14 years talking about, dog poo and bins, if I'm completely honest, and potholes. So no, it's not glamorous, but like you can really make a meaningful difference.
Well,
Um,
I used to say when I was council leader that quite a big part of my role was a bit like being a bomb disposal expert. You used to have to sort of deal with the problems that were about to blow up and be a real issue. But of course, nobody ever thanks you for the bombs that don't go off.
the amount of bombs that didn't go off I've got in my war chest is unbelievable.
Yeah,
You're so right.
yeah. And also, my council, bless, you know, councils are big organisations, public sector organisations, and it used to bring what I used to call dead birds. So every so often somebody would come along and say, "This is what we've done. Aren't you really proud?" And I'm thinking, why did you do that? What a nightmare. So you must have had that kind of experience as well. But what sort of kept you going throughout that time? What's kept you going in politics? Because it's a lonely place to be sometimes. It's hard work.
I
You're often away from family and friends a lot of the time. You're missing birthdays and always apologising for not being at parties and so on. So, what sort of kept you going?
yeah, like it's really unsocial hours, and yeah, you make so many personal sacrifices that other people don't see, but you do it because you care. And I suppose, yeah, there's so many, especially in leadership positions. Yes, it can be lonely. And a lot of the things that you've worked really hard on, no one will ever see, which is probably a good outcome, but you've worked really hard on them. If I'm honest, whenever I used to have a bit of a not so great day, or I just felt a bit low, um, God, this is going to sound kind of really corny, but I actually used to go out door knocking. Because I'm just one of those really weird counsellors that love door knocking. Because I just think you can get lost in the ivory tower and kind of the cut and thrust of officers, and this is a drama and you've got to sort out this personal issue, and this stakeholder needs something. And actually, for me, what really matters are those people on the doorstep and their needs and their issues and their concerns and how you can help them. And it just really, I made a point for a while, and I've always done this since I've joined politics. As often as I can, I go out door knocking at least once a week, but obviously more when I can, and talk to ordinary people about ordinary issues that they're facing. And it reminded me why I did what I did, and helped me refocus.
Do you know, I have exactly the same recollection of my time in office. How, sometimes you used to think, oh, really? Have I really got to get up and go out on a Saturday morning? But actually, even if you'd had a bad week, going out on a Saturday morning and talking to people on the doorstep, particularly, certainly in my experience, people in my own council ward, that because I got to know it really well.
Yeah,
That for me, I found really energising, and it was a really powerful reminder that politics isn't about you as the politician; it's about the
yeah,
people that you're
exactly.
serving.
Yeah, no, I loved it. Yeah, I love going out in. I think you're right. I think there's something special about going out in your own patch, because not only do people recognise you, I don't know about you, but I'll like just walk through it and be like, oh, I got that bench. Oh, they got a bench
Yes.
because of me.
Yeah.
Oh, I helped save that cafe. Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
yeah, I do love it, even if you need it just to remind yourself that you are making a difference, however difficult and however small.
Well, you clearly like door knocking because you're standing for election in the general election for
I
Southampton Test.
am. Yeah, I know.
So
Door
that's a
knocking
lot of
helps.
doors to knock. And so, what prompted you to want to move into national government rather than local government?
I think it's two things. If I'm honest, like most people think it's like a natural progression, but I genuinely love local government. I actually didn't make the decision lightly, because I just think the way you can impact individuals and communities' daily life, you just can't get on a national level. There is something really special about local government. So there were two main reasons I decided to run in the general. One is because Southampton's my home, and I love it. So when our local MP said he was retiring, he had a conversation with me, and actually, if I was to represent anywhere in the country, and there's been times when people have asked me before in the past in other general elections, and I've said no, because for me, it would only be Southampton. I see being a member of parliament a bit like a marriage, well, any elected representative position a bit like a marriage. Like, you're with that community through thick and thin, like you're fighting for that community, like you're keeping them going. And I just couldn't do it in an authentic and sincere and passionate way unless it came from my home city, where I was born and bred and grew up and have always lived. So yeah, for me, it's
People don't understand that, because I used to describe my council ward as my political centre of gravity. And the things that I learned about the communities that I represented shaped my views of virtually every issue that I dealt with in politics. And people
1000%.
don't get that about us, do they?
No, we're just a special breed. No, absolutely. Like Southampton's like given me so much, and I owe it so much, and it's definitely shaped who I am. And good Southampton people have helped me get to where I am. And yeah, I just couldn't represent anywhere else, and I just love the idea of representing my home city that I'm a little bit obsessed with. Um, in Parliament, so that's great. When I stepped down as council leader, actually, there's a local artist that the team commissioned, and it says Little Miss Southampton on it, which kind of probably sums me up. So I was very proud of that. And then the other reason why I decided to stand was because while local government is great and you can really make a meaningful change, actually for lasting change, you just need a change of government. And I wanted to be part of that. I didn't want to make decisions locally with both hands tied behind my back. It was just increasingly so frustrating. I mean, we were talking about the importance of housing, and councils are trying to build and we're trying to build, but it's almost like your hands and your feet are shackled while you're trying to do it, and nothing is more frustrating when you're trying to make your community and your city a better place. One of the biggest challenges I faced as leader was when that was when the cost of living was really starting to hurt, and actually how do you support local communities? And I just constantly felt that whatever we were doing was just a sticking plaster, but actually what you really needed was meaningful, lasting change. Locally we can't deal with the energy crisis and energy bills going up, but actually what Labour are pledging to do will actually make a long lasting difference, which would be transformative. What we're saying about breakfast clubs, for example, 1 in 3 people in Southampton live below the poverty line. We've helped put in anti-poverty initiatives in Southampton, but actually that breakfast club would make such a meaningful difference to local people and communities like the one I grew up in. So yeah, that's so both the fact that it's my hometown and I'm a bit obsessed with it, and 2, because we just really need some proper meaningful lasting change in the country, is probably why I decided to stand.
And that passion and that sense of drive and purpose really comes through whenever I hear you speak. You speak real passionate
That helps.
about Southampton. I'm just kind of reminded actually that there is another politician who's fairly senior at the moment who has Southampton roots.
Oh yeah, we don't talk about him.
Oh, do we not?
I remember I was asked to be on a panel about courage, and I was mentioning like different people that came from Southampton. And someone in the audience asked me a question about, oh, why didn't you mention the Prime Minister? And I was like, this is a panel about courage, and I just don't think he's got any. If he did, he'd call a general election. But I mean, do you know what? After he became Prime Minister, I do think there was a moment of pride in the fact that actually it's always nice when someone from your home city gets to that position. 2, it was really nice to see someone that looked a bit different, and I think that really meant a lot to not only in Southampton but people of colour across the country and across the world actually. But he just never comes up on the doorstep. If anything, I think it really frustrates people from Southampton, because they're like, what has Rishi ever done for us? And the answer is nothing. Which is such a shame. I mean, his dad was a great GP, I've heard, but like, did Rishi do anything for Southampton people while he was Chancellor? No, he didn't. Is he helping Southampton communities and those really struggling at the moment? No, he's not. If anything, he's made their life harder. So no, I don't think there's any great love loss for the other Southampton person. But yes, credit to him for getting to the position he has.
Well, and I really hope that not only are you elected, but you are able to really carry that sense of passion and pride in your home city into Parliament.
Oh, I hope so.
I think the trick is to have that sense of where you come from, but not use it to narrow your horizons, because sometimes politicians can get a bit parochial, but I know you're not like that. You'll be thinking not just what's good for Southampton, but what's good for the country overall.
Well, yes, that is the plan. I think people will get annoyed about the amount of times I use the word Southampton if I get there. But no, I just know that when I just think a lot of Southampton's always been a bit of a microcosm of the country, if I'm completely honest. Like, we're almost a bit like a northern city on the south coast, surrounded by leafy Hampshire, and a lot of the issues and problems we've got, others are experiencing in other urban areas across the country.
That's a really, really smart way of describing it, because I think that's absolutely spot on, and so much to do. And just before we finish, Satvir, just looking back, you've been involved in politics for a while now. If you have the chance to send a message or talk to a younger version of yourself, is there any messages of wisdom that you'd pass on to make life through politics a bit easier on the way?
Oh wow. So God, so much, so much. I would so the best advice, and actually this was when I became leader and someone gave me this advice, so I really wish they told me a bit beforehand. Because I really struggled with this, which was be authentic. And it wasn't that. I think I can only be authentic to my detriment, most times probably. But actually just owning it and actually that being a good thing, you don't have to, because I've always been a bit different. I'm not your standard politician. I definitely don't look or act or sound like one. But actually that being okay, and not only that being okay, but that being great, because you can offer a different perspective. It doesn't matter that you grew up on free school meals and the rest of them didn't, or you've got a different life experience, or you've had different jobs than they have. Actually, that gives you a perspective that those others in the room making decisions as well just don't have. And actually, that's something that's good for democracy. And yeah, I just think that whatever position you're in, whatever sector, in any leadership position, just be yourself and surround yourself with good people, is probably what I'd say to anybody. But definitely my former self, like, yeah, I'd probably say to myself, like, it's going to be all right. Just be yourself. You'll be fine. Which probably sounds extremely patronizing to a younger me. But yeah, that's probably what I'd say.
Well, Satvir, it's been terrific talking to you, and thank you so much for sharing your story and talking about social mobility. We really appreciate it, and all the very best for
Oh,
the
thanks so much,
election
Nick. Good to
ahead.
see you again and talk to you. Thanks for having me.
Great.